Budget 2021 to provide targeted support for vulnerable groups. Malaysia promised priority access to China's COVID vaccine. Thanks for choosing Updates at Noon with me, Renee Fong. The 2021 budget to be tabled on 6 November will be centred on four main thrusts, including targeted support for economic vulnerable groups during the COVID-19 pandemic. Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin said many groups had been affected, even though the government had provided various stimulus packages amounting to almost 300 billion ringgit. According to Tan Sri Muhyiddin, the thrusts were aimed at preventing the B40 group from falling into poverty by providing a strong safety net.
Dan ini akan kita tumpukan pada tiga tonggak utama, three main pillars, iaitu pertama ialah memperkasakan rakyat, menyokong perniagaan dan juga untuk kita terus memperkukuhkan ekonomi kita. Ini ialah di samping kita nak memastikan agar kesihatan awam dan sokongan buat Barisan Hadapan ini yang telah pun kita lakukan selama ini dapat kita teruskan. Iaitu termasuk antara lain sokongan yang bersasar untuk golongan yang mudah terjejas. I think ini berita yang agak menarik dan juga diminati. Apapun peruntukan almanjawan, antara lain yang penting adalah nak melihat golongan mudah terjejas. Dan saya kira dalam tempoh COVID ini saja sudah ramai yang telah terjejas.
As for the second thrust, he said the budget would focus on supporting industries through specific incentives once recovery measures are implemented. The other core thrusts include empowering service delivery and developing sustainable living. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister said the National Security Council's decision to impose Conditional Movement Control Order (CMCO) on Selangor, Kuala Lumpur and Putrajaya is a correct move to curb the spread of COVID-19. Tan Sri Muhyiddin assured parents that the government prioritises the safety of school students to the highest degree following the closure of schools in the affected zones.
Jadi sebab itu dalam kes Selangor dan sebagainya itu kita dah putuskan tutup. Masuk sabak berenam yang hijau pun tutup juga. Pasal susah bagi kita ada tengah sekolah buka kena tutup, elok kita tutup untuk tempoh 2 minggu dan lepas tu kita tengok keadaan bagaimana. Kalau keadaan bertambah baik maka bolehlah dibuka semula itu.
Tan Sri Muhyiddin also said that the implementation of CMCO in the entire Sabah, which started yesterday, was not too late. He, however, admits that the state election held last month impacted the restriction order, which should have been implemented earlier.
What we have decided yesterday, and we reaffirm our position as far as Sabah is concerned, we're looking at it very thoroughly. I can mention in hours to explain what we have done so far. For example, in the area of healthcare, what Tan Sri Sham, our DG, have done is an excellent job. He told us that all these necessary things that is required to put things in place for Sabah and to curb the further spread of COVID-19 in Sabah is to reinforce the frontline. We have approved the request in terms of staffing. I think doctors are taken in on contract, nurses are taken in on contract like we did before, just to fulfill Sabah requirements.
The Premier also stated that the government has increased surveillance in the waters of Sabah by boosting security assets and the strength of authorities. Border control in Sabah waters will continue to be tightened to halt the entrance of illegal immigrants. Grocery and convenience stores are allowed to operate from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. during the CMCO in Selangor, Kuala Lumpur and Putrajaya. Senior Minister Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri said food purchases are encouraged to be done through delivery or takeaway only. Furthermore, dine-in at restaurants are limited to only 2 people per table.
Pasar harian kita benarkan daripada 6 pagi hingga 2 petang. Pasar borong daripada 4 pagi hingga 2 petang saja. Pasar tani kita benarkan daripada 6 pagi hingga 12 tengah hari. Pasar malam kita benarkan antara 4 petang hingga 10 malam. Walau bagaimanapun, bagi mengawal dan untuk memastikan pematuhan SOP, pasar tani dan pasar malam yang pertamanya perlu pengawasan daripada anggota rela. Jadi anggota rela akan memantau dari segi SOP, dari segi pematuhan SOP, kerana seperti kita tahu, apabila pasar tani dan pasar malam dibenarkan, pihak kerajaan telah pun menyediakan SOP yang amat ketat.
As for petrol stations, CMCO operating hours are from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. with the exception of stations along highways which are permitted to operate 24 hours. Datuk Sri Ismail also reminded individuals needing to cross Selangor and Kuala Lumpur borders to obtain approval from police before embarking on their journey. The same goes for individuals boarding flights through KLIA, KLIA2 and Subang Airport. Meanwhile, in Putrajaya, 4 roadblocks were erected at 4 locations at the stroke of midnight following the implementation of the CMCO. According to Putrajaya Police Chief ACP Muhammad Fadzil Ali, the roadblocks are located at Lebuh Sentosa heading towards the Maju Expressway Max, Persiaran Selatan heading towards Dengkil, Persiaran Utara Exit 2A to Kajang and Persiaran Utara Exit 3 to Puchong.
Pada malam ini kita lebih kepada menasihati dan mengingatkan tentang do and don'ts lah di sekatan jalan raya dan apa-apa juga tindakan-tindakan sekiranya melanggar selepas ini mungkin kita akan mengambil tindakan lah.
ACP Muhammad Fadzil also reminded those having urgent matters to attend, such as funerals, to obtain permission from either the district police chief, his deputy precinct 7 or precinct 11 station chief. However, careful consideration will take place, especially if the intended destination is a high-risk zone. He also urged residents to provide full cooperation for the duration of 14 days to reduce travelling to stop the spread of COVID-19. 3 roads in Petaling Jaya district were also closed at midnight in line with the implementation of the CMCO for 2 weeks. They are the Jalan Persiaran Mahogany in Section 9, Jalan Persiaran Jati in Section 8 and Jalan Persiaran Sungai Buloh. According to Petaling Jaya Deputy Police Chief Superintendent Ku Masyariman Ku Mahmud, this is vital in controlling the movement of residents in the area to curb the spread of COVID-19.
Dalam daerah pentadbiran Petaling Jaya, kawasan Kota Damansara telah mencatatkan kadar jangkitan COVID yang agak tinggi dibandingkan lain-lain kawasan. Sehingga semalam lebih 30 kes telah dilaporkan berlaku di dalam kawasan Kota Damansara.
He explained that following the road closures, commuters can use alternative routes such as the Persiaran Kenanga Road via Kota Damansara Toll Road, Jalan Persiaran Surian and Jalan Persiaran Tropicana. The closed roads can, however, still be accessed by special vehicles such as ambulances and vehicles from the Fire and Rescue Department. Pulau Pinang Remand Prison and Staff Quarters will be placed under Enhanced Movement Control Order EMCO starting tomorrow. According to Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri, the decision was made on the advice of the Ministry of Health MOH and taking into consideration the spike in new COVID-19 positive cases involving the prison cluster.
Jumlah keseluruhan individu terbabit adalah seramai 2,830 orang yang merangkumi 2,306 banduan, 304 staf penjara dan keluarga mereka yang mendiami kuartus dan 220 staf penjara dan keluarga yang tidak mendiami kuartus.
The senior minister said the decision was also made to facilitate screenings in the said community. As with previous EMCOs, entry and exit points to and from the designated area are not allowed. Furthermore, the prison staff are to require to adhere to SOPs determined by the Malaysian Prison Department. Food and other basic necessities are to be channeled and moderated by the Timur Laut District Disaster Operations Control Centre. The Ministry of Health, MOH, has identified 6 new clusters yesterday. According to its Director General, Tan Sri Dr. Nur Hisham Abdullah, 4 of them were detected in Sabah, 1 in Selangor and another in Pulau Pinang. The Semarak cluster was identified in Tawau. The index case involving a symptomatic individual on 3rd October and close contact screening revealed 13 infections. Meanwhile, the Bina cluster was detected in Beaufort following screening of a patient admitted into hospital Sipitang on 10th October. 13 new positive cases were identified from close contact screenings of the cluster.
Kluster Sabindo, Sabah. Kluster baru ni dikenal pasti di Tawau di negeri Sabah. Kes indeks bagi kluster ni iaitu kes 11,897. Telah dikenal pasti positif COVID-19 hasil saringan individu bergejala pada 3 Oktober 2020 dan telah dimasukkan ke Hospital Tawau. Saringan kontak rapat telah mengesan 13 lagi kes positif COVID-19.
The Bistari cluster was identified in Sandakan. The index case detected positive from a symptomatic individual screened on October 10th, and 18 more positive cases were identified from close contact screening. As for the Penjara Jawi cluster in Seberang Perai Selatan, Tan Sri Dr. Nur Hisham said 3 asymptomatic detainees were detected positive from admission screenings at Penang Remand Prison on October 11th. Lastly, the Bah Kenangan cluster in Hulu Langat district was identified positive from screening on his return from Sabah and was warded at Sungai Buloh Hospital. Meanwhile, in another related development, Tan Sri Dr. Nur Hisham Abdullah invites Malaysians who have previously been infected with the COVID-19 virus to participate in a longitudinal study on the response of neutralizing antibodies among COVID-19 patients in the country. He said via his Facebook account, the study was conducted by a group of researchers from the Ministry of Health's Institute of Medical Research, IMR. Tan Sri Dr. Nur Hisham explained that this study is important to know the level of neutralizing antibodies in the blood that can create immunity from the COVID-19 virus. This research has been approved by the MOH Medical Research Ethics Committee, MREC. Malaysia may get COVID-19 vaccine supplies as early as the end of this year. In delivering the good news, Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin said this is made possible with the Malaysia-China cooperation on vaccine production and distribution.
Tadi saya ada perbincangan dua hala menerusi video conferencing bersama dengan Menteri Luar China yang berada di Malaysia, dan dalam video conferencing itu kita telah bincang antara lain tentang kerjasama Malaysia dan China. Antara perkara pokok di situ ialah bantuan dan kerjasama China ke Malaysia dari segi pembekalan vaksin. Jadi bagaimana yang kita ketahui, China adalah antara negara yang paling ke depan dari segi membuat kajian pendidikan berkenaan dengan penemuan vaksin. Saya dimaklumkan sudah sampai ke tahap akhir dan sebelum akhir tahun ini mungkin sudah akan dapat digunakan selepas ujian-ujian klinikal dilaksanakan. Dalam perbincangan tadi, Menteri Luar China yang sebelum ini berbincang dengan Datuk Hishamuddin, Menteri Luar kita, bersetuju. Yang bagus ni dia kata nak bagi Malaysia priority.
The Prime Minister said the other option was to join the COVID-19 Vaccine Global Access COVAX plan by paying about 40 million ringgit to become a state member. Under the plan, he said each member would get vaccine supplies for 10% of its population, which accounted for about 3 million people in Malaysia. next, UMNO Mal's withdrawing support for Perikatan Nasional. The Election Commission EC has set the date for the polling for Batu Sapi by-election on 5th December. In a press conference in Putrajaya yesterday, EC Chairman Dato' Abdul Ghani Saleh said the nomination will be on 23rd November while the early voting on 1st December.
Pusat penerimaan calon dan pusat penjumlahan rasmi undi adalah di Auditorium Ibu Pejabat Jabatan Perhutanan Sabah, Sandakan. Manakala pusat pengiraan undi awal dan pusat pengiraan undi pos adalah di Dewan Jati Ibu Pejabat Jabatan Perhutanan Sabah di Sandakan.
According to Dato' Abdul Ghani, Sandakan Municipal Council Deputy President Farida Giao has been appointed as the returning officer for the by-election, and she will be assisted by 5 assistant returning officers. He said the Batu Sapi parliamentary by-election will cost about 6 million ringgit and involve 837 workers and 13 polling centres with 67 polling channels. Batu Sapi has 32,962 normal voters, comprising 31,152 normal voters, 672 military personnel and their spouses, and 1,138 police personnel and their spouses. The by-election is being called following the death of its incumbent, Dato' Liu Vui Kyung, of lung infection on 2nd October. The United Malays National Organisation UMNO is mulling the idea of withdrawing its support for Perikatan Nasional PN and setting up new terms to continue its political cooperation with the ruling coalition. A media statement from its Secretary General, Dato' Ahmad Mazlan, said UMNO will prepare a written agreement to be discussed as soon as possible. The matter was unanimously agreed on at the party's Supreme Council Political Bureau meeting held last night. Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin will be notified of the party's decision and new terms today. The meeting was chaired by UMNO President Datuk Sri Dr. Ahmad Zahid Hamidi and was attended by his Deputy Datuk Sri Muhammad Hassan as well as all party wing leaders. The meeting also advised the Muafakat Nasional MN Steering Committee to immediately register MN as a legitimate political coalition. Dato' Ahmad Mazlan also stressed that UMNO viewed political stability as being very important and economic growth must be enhanced. Coming up in sports, Malaysia Cup postponed to early November. In line with the current implementation of CMCO, the Youth and Sports Ministry KBS advises all sports and recreation enthusiasts in Selangor, Kuala Lumpur and Putrajaya to reschedule or postpone their activities. KBS in a statement reminded all parties to adhere to the regulations and restrictions set by the National Security Council (MKN). Closed space activities, swimming pool activities, contact or team sports, as well as hosting championships or tournaments are not allowed. However, sports and recreation activities that do not involve physical contact and can be carried out individually or participated by not more than 10 persons, such as trekking, jogging, cycling and esports, are still permitted. Centralized athlete training programs under the National Sports Council, NSC, and state sports councils can still be conducted under a controlled and closed environment. Meanwhile, in other states not affected by the CMCO, sports and recreation activities may be conducted as usual with compliance to SOPs. The 2020 Malaysia Cup competition, slated to begin on 25th October, has been postponed to early November following the implementation of the Conditional Movement Control Order (CMCO) in the Klang Valley and Sabah. Malaysian Football League (MFL) Chief Executive Officer Dato' Abdul Ghani Hassan said the early rounds of the matches involving the 16 teams would now be held from 6 to 8 November. Dato' Abdul Ghani added that the quarterfinals will be on 12 and 13 November, the semi-finals on 17 November and the final on 22nd November.
Kita membuat pindahan ini kerana memandangkan kepentingan kesihatan di peringkat semua pihak, pemain, pegawai, malah petugas-petugas stadium dan juga masyarakat khususnya. Maka MFL mengambil langkah ini untuk menangguhkan perancangan jadual yang sebelum ini telah kita hebahkan.
He said the new fixture had also taken into account the participation of Super League champions Johor Darul Ta'zim JDT in the Asian Champions League ACL competition. There are 4 Klang Valley teams involved in the Malaysia Cup competition, namely Selangor, Petaling Jaya City FC, University Technology Mara UiTM FC and Kuala Lumpur. Meanwhile, the MFL also announced that the Super League match between Sabah and UiTM FC at the UiTM Stadium in Shah Alam and Premier League clash between Kuala Lumpur and Kuching FA had been moved to 31st October. This, Dato' Abdul Ghani said, was to allow each team to have between 3 and 4 days of rest and travel. And that concludes today's edition of Updates at Noon. In our top story, Malaysia promised priority access to China's COVID vaccine. Tune in to News at 10 coming up at 10 p.m. on Saluran Berita RTM on My Free Views channel 123. You can also stream the news by surfing RTM's MyClick. Thanks for watching. I'm Renee Loretta Fong. Have a pleasant afternoon.